here again. Today we're going to be dealing with dimensions. Now, it doesn't mean what you think it means. We're going to be talking about arrays, of course. Sometimes you need to deal with collections of data and not just individual elements. And that's where arrays come in. There are different kinds of arrays. We're going to be talking about what we call primitive arrays. Primitive arrays are arrays that store primitives for the most part. They'll store objects too. But we're really just going to be talking about primitives here. So there are different dimensions. That's where the dimensions thing comes in. There are different dimensions that we can use with arrays. I am illustrating 3 different dimensions on this slide. If you think about an Excel spreadsheet and you're just looking at a row of data, that's a single dimension. When we introduced rows and columns, we have a second dimension or 2-dimensional array. And when we're thinking about rows, columns, and sheets, that's a 3-dimensional array. Now you can have further dimensions, but I recommend you only focus on 1 or 2-dimensional arrays. Anything beyond that, frankly, gets too complicated. So let's look at the way that we would deal with arrays in Scratch and Java. Scratch has this concept of a list. It's basically an array. If you go to data, you can create a list and you name it, and frankly, that's all there is to it in creating an array in Scratch. Java's a little more complicated. It has 2 different ways to create arrays. Both of them start by telling the computer what type of array it is and what the name of the array is. And then we use these big blocky brackets to denote that it's an array. In the first method of creating an array, we actually specify, using squiggly braces and a comma-delimited list, the values that are in the array. So that tells the computer not only the values, but also the size of the array at that time. The second way doesn't tell the computer it tells the computer what the size is, but not what the values are. And we use this new word that we haven't used yet called new, which basically just creates a spot in memory for the array to live. The next thing that you're probably going to want to do with an array is store some data in it. In Scratch, it's as simple as adding whatever the value is to my array. That's pretty simple. Scratch manages where to put it and everything. In Java, you have to tell the array which element that you want to add it to. And so if we were creating an array of 5 elements, the first element is 0 and the last element is 4. I know it's a little tricky, but that's just the way it is in computers. The last thing that you might want to do is to print the array. In both Java and Scratch, you have to have a loop. The loop goes through each element of the array and it prints out that element. In Scratch, we use the repeat block, and in Java, we almost always like to use a for loop. So I want to talk about one other thing related to arrays before we get to some actual hands-on. I want to talk about parallel arrays. Oftentimes, we want to store bits of various types of information together. An example that we're going to be using here in a few minutes is storing a list or a collection of DVDs and being able to track them. So I use a table here in this slide to illustrate that. We have 3 different arrays. We have an array of names, an array of years, and an array of ratings. And then each of the rows corresponds with a movie. So row 0 in the name array, the year array, and the rating array all correspond with the movie Heidi. And so when I add stuff to an array, I can add a new movie or a new DVD. I add all of that at once, each element to a different array. We'll get into it in more detail. but I hope that helps you to understand. Well, what I'd like to do now is create that DVD collection. We'll start in Scratch, and then we'll move to Java. Have fun! Well, we're back in Scratch now to show you a demonstration of using arrays. Now, like I mentioned earlier, in Scratch, they call them lists, but they're basically the same. They're single dimensioned, but they're arrays. Now, we said earlier that we were going to put together a DVD collection. The DVD collection will create a program that stores a set of DVDs, including the following elements: name, years, or the year, and the rating. And then, once we've stored 2 or 3 of those, we're going to print off the list. So let's get started. The first thing that we know is that we're going to create one of those parallel arrays. So we're going to need 3 arrays. We're going to need a names array. We're going to need a years array. And we're going to need a ratings array. All right. So what we're going to do is we're going to ask the user to give us a name, a rating, and a year. And then we're going to populate the name, rating, and year in these 3 respective arrays. And then we're going to print it. So we're just going to do one for now. So we'll start out with our typical start block. And we're going to come over here to sensing and ask the user, enter the name of a movie. Okay. Then we're going to take the result of that, which is this answer block, and we're going to store it in the name array. And then we're going to come right back around again, and we're going to ask the user, enter the year of the movie. We're going to do the same thing. We're going to add that with the answer, because it keeps you reusing that variable. We'll put that in the year array. And then one more time, enter the rating of the movie. Again, drop this in, grab the answer, and that goes in the rating. Okay, so what we've done is we've just populated the array with 1 row in each of the arrays. Okay, now let's print them out. Okay, so we're going to use this repeat block here. Okay, but we're going to need a variable that keeps track of where we're at. So let's come in here and create a variable. Let's call it array index. And we're going to set the array index right here. We'll set it to 1. Unlike in Java, the index for the array starts at 1 in Scratch. So the first row is 1, and the second row is 2, and the third row is 3. I mean, that makes perfect sense, right? Okay. Now we need to know how many times to go through the array. And Scratch provides us an element that does that. It's called this length of array. Now we can pick any of the arrays because basically they're all going to be the same length. So I'm just going to choose name. And then we're going to print out. I'm going to drag 3 of these guys in here, and we'll fill them in here in a second. And then the last thing that we need to do is we need to increment this array index by 1. Okay, I hope that makes sense. So let's concentrate on what we're going to put in the say. What we're going to do is we're going to use this item number This actually says, give me item number X from the array. Okay? And so we're going to say, give me item number, and instead, right here, we're going to put this array index, because that'll be the variable it corresponds. And so at first we're going to print the name. We're going to wait 2 seconds. And then we're going to print the, oh, I already dragged that over there. You're getting me here. All right. We're going to, let me drag 3 of these just to make it faster. And then the array and index. And then we just change these from name array to year array to ratings array. Now, if all goes well, this will work. So let's click our little green flag. Enter the name of a movie. All right. Let's go with Heidi, one of my favorites. Enter the year. Well, I think it was 1937. And the rating is G. Now you notice over here on this side, it's actually showing these. You can specify whether you want to show them or not. This is just for debugging purposes. Obviously, once you really got this program running, you wouldn't want to show them. And then while I was talking, it just went through them. So let's do it again. Now, one other thing I'm going to add here is this delete. I'm going to bring all these down one. I'm going to add this delete item here, because otherwise it'll just continue to add to the array, and I'm going to put all. So it's going to clear the array out. I guess I need to do it 3 times, 1 for each. So it clears them out. You could really make a mess of things if you were deleting one and not the other, because then the records wouldn't correspond with each other, and let's just face it, it would be a mess. All right, let's run it one more time. Starting over, Heidi, 1937. And as soon as I hit G here, little scratchy there is going to show us the results. Heidi, 1937, and G. Well, there you have it. That's really simple, but that's how we do it in Scratch.